My name is Felipe Martinez, Felipe Victor Martinez. And tonight, I'm going to do a little reading. It's a long poem by Allen Ginsberg. It's Howl. I'm going to read this first and then tell you a little bit about myself later. Howl by Allen Ginsberg. For Carl Solomon. I saw the best minds in my generation starving, destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night, who poverty in tatters and hollow-eyed high sat up, smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats floating across the tops of cities contemplating jazz, who bowed their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mulhemian angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated, who passed through universities with radiant cool eyes hallucinating Arkansas and Blake light tragedy among the scholars of war, who were expelled from academies for crazy and publishing obscene odes on the windows of the skull, who cowered in unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their pubic beards returning to Laredo with the belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels and drank turpentine in Paradise Alley, that her purgatory, their torsos night after night, with dreams, with drugs, with waking nightmares, alcohol and cock and endless balls. Incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud, lightning in the mind, leaping toward poles of Canada and Patterson, illuminating all motionless worlds of time between. Peyote solitudes of halls, backyard green cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness, over the rooftop, storefront burrows of tea-hide, joyride, neon blinking, traffic light, sun and moon and tree, and vibrations in the roaring winter dusks of Brooklyn, ash can rantings, and kind king light of mine, who chained themselves to the subways for the endless ride from Battery to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine until the noise of the wheels and the children brought them down, shuddering, mouth racked and battered, bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo, who sank all night in submarine light and Bickford floated out and sat through the stale bare afternoon in desolate fugazis, listening to the crack of doom on the hydrogen jukebox, who talked continuously 70 hours from Park to Pad to Bar to Bellevue to Museum to Brooklyn Bridge. A lost battalion of platonic conversationalists jumping down the stoops, off the fire escapes with windowsills, off Empire State, out of the moon, yakety yakking, screaming, vomiting, whispering facts and memories and anecdotes and eyeballs, kicks and shocks of hospitals and jails and wars, whole intellects disgorged in total recall for 7 days and nights with brilliant eyes, meet for the synagogue, cast on the pavement, who vanished into nowhere, Zen, New Jersey, leaving a trail of ambiguous picture postcards of Atlantic City Hall, suffering eastern sweats and Tangerine bone grindings and migraines of China, under junk withdrawal, under Newark bleak furnished room, who wandered around and around at midnight in railroad yard, wondering where to go and went, leaving no broken hearts, who lit cigarettes in boxcars, racketing through snow toward lonesome farms, grandfather night, who studied Plotinus, Poe, St. John of the Cross, telepathy, Bob Kabbalah, because the cosmos instinctively vibrated at their feet in canvas, who loaned it to the streets of Idaho seeking visionary Indian angels, who were visionary Indian angels, who thought they were only mad when Baltimore gleamed in supernatural ecstasy, who jumped in limousines with the Chinamen of Oklahoma in the impulse of winter midnight street light, small town rain, who lounged hungry and lonesome through the Houston seeking jazz or sex or soup, and followed the brilliant Spaniard to converse about America and eternity, a hopeless task, and so took ship to Africa, who disappeared in the volcanoes of Mexico, leaving behind nothing but the shadow of dungarees and the lava and ash of poetry scattered in the fireplace Chicago, who reappeared on the West Coast investigating FBI in their beards and shorts, with big pacifist eyes, sexy in their dark skin, passing out incomprehensible leaflets, who burned cigarette holes in their arms protesting the narcotic tobacco haze of capitalism, who distributed super communist pamphlets in Union Square, weeping, undressing, while the sirens of Los Alamos wailed them down, and wailed down Wall, and the Staten Island ferry also wailed, who broke down crying in gymnasiums, white gymnasiums, naked and trembling before the machinery of other skeletons, who bit detectives in the neck and shrieked with delight in police cars for committing no crime but their own wild cooking, pedestrian intoxication, who howled on their knees in the subways and were dragged off to the roof, waving genitals and manuscripts, who let themselves be fucked in the ass by saintly motorcyclists and screamed with joy, who blew and were blown by the human seraphim, the sailors and caresses of Atlantic Caribbean love, who bawled in the morning and in the evening in rose gardens in the grass of public parks and cemeteries, scattering their semen freely, whomever come who may, who hiccuped endless trying to giggle, but wound up sobbed behind petition in the Turkish bath, when the blonde and naked angel came to pierce them with a sword, who lost their loved boys in the three old shrews of fate, the one-eyed shrew of the heterosexual dollar, and the one-eyed shrew that winks out of the womb, and the one-eyed shrew that does nothing but sit on her ass and snip the intellectual golden threads of the craftsman's loom, who copulated ecstatic and insatic with a bottle of beer, a sweetheart, a package of cigarettes, a candle, and fell off the bed, continued along the floor and down the hall, and ended fainting on the wall with the vision of ultimate cunt and cum eluding, and the last sign of consciousness of consciousness, who sweetened the snatches of a million girls trembling in the sunset and were red-eyed in the morning, but prepared to sweeten the snatch of sunrise, flashing buttocks under the barns and naked in the lake, who went out whoring through Colorado, Marid, stolen night cars, NC secret hero of these poems, Coxman and Adonis of Denver, joy to the memory of the innumerable lays of girls in the empty lots in the back diner backyards, movie houses, rickety rows, mountaintops and caves, or with gaunt waitress in familiar roadside lonely petticoat uplifting, and especially secret gas stations, solifums of John's and hometown alleys too, who faded out in the vast sordid movies and were shifted in dreams, who woke on a sudden Manhattan and picked themselves up out of the basements hung over with heartless Tokay and horrors of Third Avenue, iron dreams, and stumbled to unemployment offices, who walked all night long with their shoes full of blood on the snowbank docks, waiting for the door in the East River to open to room full of steam, heat, and opium, who created great suicidal dramas on the apartment cliff banks in the Hudson under the wartime blue floodlight of the moon, and their heads shall be crowned with laurel in oblivion, who ate the lamb stew of imagination or digested the crab of the muddy bottom of the rivers of the Bowery, who wept at the romance of the streets with their push carts full of onions and bad music, who sat in boxes breathing the darkness under the bridge and rose up to build harpsichords in their lofts, who coughed on the sixth floor of the Harlem crowned with flame under the tubercular sky surrounded by orange crates of theology, who scribbled all night, rocking and rolling over lofty incarnations which the yellow morning were stanzas of gibberish, who cooked rotten animals, lung, heart, feet, tail, borscht, and tortillas, dreaming of pure vegetable kingdom, who plunged themselves under meat trucks looking for an egg, who threw their watches off the roof to cast their ballot for eternity outside the time, and the alarm clocks fell on their heads every day for the next decade, who cut their wrist 3 times successfully, unsuccessfully gave up, and were forced to open antique stores where they thought they would be growing old and cried, who were burned alive in their innocent flannel suits on Madison Avenue, blast leading verse and tanked up clad in the iron regiments of fashion and nitroglycerin shrieks of the fairies of advertising and mustard gas of sinister intelligent editors, and were run down by the drunken taxicabs of absolute reality, who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge, this actually happened, and walked away unknown and forgotten into the ghostly days of Chinatown soup alleys and fire trucks, not even one free bear, who sang out their windows in despair, fell out of the subway window, jumped in the filthy Passaic, leaped on Negroes, cried all over the streets, danced on broken wine glasses, barefoot, smashed phonograph records, nostalgic European 1930s German jazz, finished the whiskey and threw up groaning into the bloody toilet, moans in their ears in the blast of the colossal steam whistles, who were barreled down the highways of the past, journeying to each other's hot rod, Galtala, jail, solitude, watch, or Birmingham jazz incarnation, who drove cross country 72 hours to find out if I had a vision, or you had a vision, or he had a vision, to find out eternity, who journeyed to Denver, who died in Denver, who came back to Denver and waited in vain, who watched over Denver and brooded and loaned in Denver, and finally went to find out the time, and now Denver is lonesome for her heroes, who fell on their knees in hopeless cathedrals praying for each other's salvation in the light and breasts until the soul illuminated its hair for a second, who crashed through their minds in jail waiting for the impossible criminals with the golden heads and the charm of reality in their hearts, who sang sweet blues to Alcatraz, who retired to Mexico to cultivate a habit, or Rocky Mount to tend to Buddha, or Tangiers to Boys, or the Southern Pacific to Black Locomotive, or Harvard to Narcissus, to Woodlawn to the Daisy Chain or Grave, who demanded saintly trials accusing radio of hypnotism and were left with their insanity in their hands in a hung journey, who threw potato salad at CCNY lecturers in datism and subsequently presented themselves on the granite steps of the madhouse with shaven heads and harlequin speech of suicide, demanding instantaneous lobotomy, and were giving instead the concrete void of insulin, metastrol, electricity, hydrotherapy, psychotherapy, occupational therapy, ping pong, and amnesia, who, in humorous protest, overturned only one symbolic ping pong table, resting briefly in catatonia, returning years later truly bald for a wig of blood and tears and fingers and a visible madman, doom of the wards of the mad towns of the East, Pilgrim State, Rockland's Greystone, Fortied halls, bickering with the echoes of the soul, rocking and rolling in the midnight solitude bench dome realms of love, dream of life, a nightmare, bodies turned to stone as heavy as the moon, with mother, finally, and the last fantastic book flung out of the tenement window, and the last door closed at 4 a.m., and the last telephone slammed at the wall in reply, and the last furnished room emptied to the last piece of mental furniture, a yellow paper rose twisted on a wire hanger in the closet, and even that imaginary nothing but a hopeful bit of hallucination. Ah, Cal, While you are not safe, I am not safe. And now you're really in the total animal soup of time, and who therefore ran through the icy streets, obsessed with a sudden flash of alchemy, of the use of the ellipse catalog and the variable measure in the vibrating plane, who dreamt and made incarnate gaps in time and space through images juxtaposed and trapped the archangel of the soul between two visual images and joined the elemental verbs and set the noun and dash in consciousness together, jumping with sensation of patter omnipotence eternity to recreate the syntax in the measure of poor human prose, stand before you speechless, intelligent, and shaking with shame, rejected yet confessing, out of the soul to conform to the rhythm of thought in his naked and endless head. The madman bum and the angel beaten time unknown, yet putting down here what might be left to say in time and come after death, and rose incarnate, the ghostly close of jazz and golden horn, shadow and band and blue, and the suffering America's naked mind for love into the Eli, Eli, Lama, Lama, Sabachanchi saxophone cry that shrivered the cities down to the last radio, with the absolute heart of the poem of life bushed out of their own bodies, good to eat 1,000 years. Howl by Allen Ginsberg. Read by Felipe Victor Martinez. So I've been writing my whole life, and I started reading back in 1998 at open mics, and I felt like there was a purpose when I read. I think there is a purpose. I think we all should read what's on our mind, or at least create something. And hopefully this is one of many more little snippets of poetry from other poets and maybe myself. Make sure you leave your feedback and comments below, as I am new at this. And thank you so much.